Ready, Sirius? Said Lupin. Black had already retrieved Snape's wand from the bed. He approached Lupin and the struggling rat, and his wet eyes suddenly seemed to be burning in his face. Together? He said quietly. I think so, said Lupin, holding Scabbers tightly in one hand and his wand in the other. On the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. A flash of blue light erupted from both wands. For one moment, Scabbers was frozen in midair, his small gray form twisting madly. Ron yelled. The rat fell and hit the floor. There was another blinding flash light, and then it was like watching a speeded up film of a growing tree. A head was shooting upwards from the ground. Limbs were sprouting. A moment later, a man was standing where Scabbers had been, cringing and wringing his hands. Crookshanks was spitting and snarling on the bed. The hair on his back was standing up. He was a very short man, hardly taller than Harry and Hermione. His thin, colorless hair was unkempt, and there was a large bald patch on top. He had the shrunken appearance of a plump man who had lost a lot of weight in a short time. His skin looked grubby, almost like Scabbers' fur, and something of the rat lingered around his pointed nose and his very small, watery eyes. He looked around at them all, his breathing fast and shallow. Harry saw his eyes dart to the door and back again. Well, hello, Peter, Lupin said pleasantly, as though rats frequently erupted into old school friends around him. Long time no see. Sirius, Remus. Even Pettigrew's voice was squeaky. Again his eyes darted towards the door. My friends! My old friends! Black's wand arm rose, but Lupin seized him around the wrist, gave him a warning look, then turned again to Pettigrew, his voice light and casual. We've been having a little chat, Peter, about what happened the night Lily and James died. You might have missed the finer points while you were squeaking around down there on the bed. Remus! Gasped Pettigrew, and Harry could see beads of sweat breaking out over the pasty face. You don't believe him, do you? He tried to kill me, Remus. So we've heard, said Lupin, more coldly. I'd like to clear up 1 or 2 little matters with you, Peter, if you'd be so... He's come to try to kill me again, Peter squeaked suddenly, pointing at Black. And Harry saw that he used his middle finger because his index was missing. He killed Lily and James, and now he's going to kill me too. You've got to help me, Remus. Black's face looked more skull-like than ever as he stared at Pettigrew with his fathomless eyes. No one's going to try and kill you until we've sorted a few things out, said Lupin. Sorted things out? Squealed Pettigrew, looking wildly about at him once more, his eyes taking in the boarded windows and, again, the only door. I knew he'd come after me. I knew he'd be back for me. I've been waiting for this for 12 years. You knew Sirius was going to break out of Azkaban? Said Lupin, his brow furrowed. When nobody has ever done it before? He's got dark powers the rest of us can only dream of, Peter Pettigrew shouted shrilly. How else did he get out of there? I suppose he who must not be named taught him a few tricks. Black started to laugh, a horrible, mirthless laugh that filled the whole room. Voldemort, teach me tricks, he said. Pettigrew flinched as though Black had brandished a whip at him. What? Scared to hear your old master's name? Said Black. I don't blame you, Peter. His lot aren't very happy with you, are they? Don't know what you mean, Sirius, muttered Pettigrew, his breathing faster than ever. His whole face was shining with sweat now. You haven't been hiding from me for 12 years, said Black. You've been hiding from Voldemort's old supporters. I heard things in Azkaban, Peter. They all think you're dead, or you'd have to answer to them. I've heard them screaming all sorts of things in their sleep. Sounds like they think the double-crosser double-crossed them. Voldemort went to the Potters on your information, and Voldemort met his downfall there. And not all Voldemort's supporters ended up in Azkaban, did they? There are still plenty out there biding their time, pretending they've seen the error of their ways. If they ever got wind that you were still alive, Peter. Don't know what you're talking about, said Peter Pettigrew again, more shrilly than ever. He wiped his face on his sleeve and looked up at Lupin. You don't believe this? This madness, Ramus? I must admit, Peter, I have difficulty in understanding why an innocent man would want to spend 12 years as a rat, said Lupin evenly. Innocent but scared, squealed Pettigrew. If Voldemort's supporters were after me, it was because I put one of their best men in Azkaban, the spy Sirius Black. Black's face contorted. How dare you? He growled, sounding suddenly like the bear-sized dog he had been. I, a spy for Voldemort? When did I ever sneak around people who were stronger and more powerful than myself? But you, Peter, I'll never understand why I didn't see you were the spy from the start. You always liked big friends who'd look after you, didn't you? It used to be us. Me and Ramus and James. Peter wiped his face again. He was almost panting for breath. Me? A spy? You must be out of your mind. Never. I don't know how you could say such a thing. Lily and James only made you secret keeper because I suggested it, Black hissed, so venomously that Pettigrew took a step backwards. I thought it was the perfect plan, a bluff. Voldemort would be sure to come after me, would never dream they'd use a weak, talentless thing like you. It must have been the finest moment of your miserable life telling Voldemort you could hand them the Potters. Pettigrew was muttering distractedly. Harry caught words like far-fetched and lunacy, but he couldn't help paying more attention to the ashen color of Pettigrew's face and the way his eyes continued to dart towards windows and doors. Professor Lupin, said Hermione timidly, can I say something? Certainly, Hermione, said Lupin courteously. Well, Scabbers, this man, he's been sleeping in Harry's dormitory for 3 years. If he's working for you-know-who, how come he never tried to hurt Harry before now? There, said Peter, shrilly, pointing at Ron with his maimed hand. Thank you. You see, Remus, I've never hurt a hair on Harry's head. Why should I? I'll tell you why, said Black. Because you never did anything for anyone unless you could see what was in it for you. Voldemort's been hiding for 15 years. They say he's half dead. You weren't about to commit murder right under Albus Dumbledore's nose for a wreck of a wizard who'd lost all his power, were you? You'd want to be quite sure he was the biggest bully in the playground before you went back to him, wouldn't you? Why else did you find a wizard family to take you in? Keeping an ear out for news, weren't you, Peter? Just in case your old protector regained strength and it was safe to rejoin him. Peter opened his mouth and closed it several times. He seemed to have lost the ability to talk. Mr. Black, serious? Said Hermione. Black jumped at being addressed like this and stared at Hermione as though he had never seen anything quite like her. If you don't mind me asking, how did you get out of Azkaban if you didn't use dark magic? Thank you, gasped Pettigrew, nodding frantically at her. Exactly, precisely what I... But Lupin silenced him with a look. Black was frowning slightly at Hermione, but not as though he were annoyed with her. He seemed to be pondering his answer. I don't know how I did it, he said slowly. I think the only reason I never lost my mind is that I knew I was innocent. That wasn't a happy thought, so the Dementors couldn't suck it out of me. But it kept me sane and knowing who I am. Helped me keep my powers. So when it all became too much, I could transform in my cell, become a dog. Dementors can't see, you know, he swallowed. They feel their way towards people by feeding off their emotions. They could tell that my feelings were less human, less complex when I was a dog. But they thought, of course, that I was losing my mind like everyone else in there, so it didn't trouble them. But I was weak, very weak, and I had no hope of driving them away from me without a wand. But then I saw Peter in that picture. I realized he was at Hogwarts with Harry, perfectly positioned to act. If one hint reached his ears that the dark side was gathering strength again. Peter was shaking his head, mouthing noiselessly, but staring all the while at Black as though hypnotized, ready to strike at the moment he could be sure of allies, and to deliver the last Potter to them. If he gave them Harry, who dares say he'd betray Lord Voldemort? He'd be welcomed back with honor. So you see, I had to do something. I was the only one who knew Peter was still alive. Harry remembered what Mr. Weasley had told Mrs. Weasley. The guards say he's been talking in his sleep. Always the same words. He's at Hogwarts. It was as if someone lit a fire in my head and the Dementors couldn't destroy it. It wasn't a happy feeling. It was an obsession. But it gave me strength. It cleared my mind. So one night, when they opened my door to bring food, I slipped past them as a dog. It's so much harder for them to sense animal emotions that they were confused. I was thin, very thin, thin enough to slip through the bars. I swam as a dog back to the mainland. I journeyed north and slipped into the Hogwarts grounds as a dog. I've been living in the forest ever since, except for when I came to watch the Quidditch, of course. You fly as well as your father did, Harry. He looked at Harry, who did not look away. Believe me, he croaked. Believe me, Harry. I never betrayed James and Lily. I would have died before I betrayed them. At long last, Harry believed him. Throat too tight to speak, he nodded. No! Peter had fallen to his knees as though Harry's nod had been his own death sentence. He shuffled forward on his knees, groveling, his hands clasped in front of him, as though praying. Sirius, it's me, it's Peter, your friend. You wouldn't. Black kicked out at Pettigrew, and he recoiled. There's enough filth on my robes without you touching them, said Black. Remus, Pettigrew squeaked, turning to Lupin instead, writhing imploringly in front of him. You don't believe this? Wouldn't Sirius have told you they'd changed the plan? Not if he thought I was the spy, Peter, said Lupin. I assume that's why you didn't tell me, Sirius, he said, casually over Pettigrew's head. Forgive me, Remus, said Black. Not at all, Padfoot, old friend, said Lupin, who was now rolling up his sleeves. And will you in turn forgive me for believing you were the spy? Of course, said Black, and a ghost of a grin flitted across his gaunt face. He too began rolling up his sleeves. Shall we kill him together? Yes, I think so, said Lupin grimly. You wouldn't, you won't, gasped Pettigrew, and he scrambled around to Ron. Ron, haven't I been a good friend, a good pet? You wouldn't let them kill me, Ron, will you? You're on my side, aren't you? But Ron was staring at Pettigrew with the utmost revulsion. I let you sleep in my bed, he said. Kind boy, kind master. Pettigrew crawled towards Ron. You won't let them do it. I was your rat. I was a good pet. I'm going to pause it there.